The US government made it illegal to teach these techniques. They burned the books, punished the elders, erased them from history. But when survival experts finally tested what remained, they discovered we'd outlawed some of the most advanced wilderness science ever developed. Why didn't they want you knowing this? Here's the thing about survival that most people get wrong. You don't need fancy gear. You don't need electricity. You don't even need metal. For thousands of years, Native American tribes across this continent had a water purification system so effective that modern scientists had to admit they were completely wrong to dismiss it. Hot stone boiling sounds primitive, right? Almost embarrassingly simple, but it works better than you'd ever guess. Here's how it goes. You heat rocks in a fire until they're screaming hot. Then you drop them into a container made of wood, bark, or animal hide. The water starts boiling almost instantly. Bacteria, dead, parasites, gone. And you didn't need a single piece of metal to do it. I tried this once on a camping trip when my buddy forgot the pot. We all looked at each other like idiots until someone remembered this technique. 20 minutes later, we had safe drinking water and a story nobody back home believed. Now, why did this matter so much historically? When European settlers arrived, they ignored indigenous water knowledge completely. They thought they knew better. The result? Massive outbreaks of cholera, dysentery, and typhoid. People were dying from the very water they drank, while native communities stayed healthy using methods their ancestors perfected over millennia. And the archaeological evidence backs this up completely. Researchers have found sites absolutely littered with fire-cracked rocks near ancient camps. These weren't random cooking accidents. They were water purification stations used for generations. Modern survival science finally ran the numbers. Stone boiling reaches pathogen-killing temperatures just as fast as metal pot boiling. Sometimes faster, depending on the stone type and fire intensity. The U.S. military teaches this technique today. So do wilderness survival schools worldwide. Not as some historical curiosity, but as a legitimate backup when modern systems fail. Think about that for a second. A method developed thousands of years ago, dismissed as primitive, now sits in official military training manuals. Makes you wonder what else we ignored, doesn't it? During blackouts, natural disasters, or those increasingly common boil water advisories, this knowledge becomes genuinely life-saving. No electricity required, no special equipment, just rocks, fire, and a container that definitely shouldn't be able to hold boiling water, but somehow does. Water keeps you alive. But when things go sideways, water alone isn't enough. You need calories, lots of them. And what comes next might be the most energy-dense survival food ever created. Forget everything you think you know about survival food. Protein bars, they expire, canned goods, heavy, bulky, and they'll go bad eventually. Freeze-dried meals? Hope you enjoy paying $15 for reconstituted mush. But here's something wild. There's a food that Native Americans made that lasts longer than your mortgage. Seriously, we're talking decades without a fridge, without freezing, without any of those little silica packets that say, "Do not eat," which, let's be honest, we've all been tempted. Pemmican. It's basically dried meat pounded into powder, mixed with rendered animal fat, and sometimes berries. That's it. 3 ingredients. Your grandmother's fruitcake has more complexity, and somehow this simple mixture became the most calorie-dense survival food ever created. 1 pound contains around 3,500 calories. For comparison, modern military MREs pack about 1,200 calories per meal and weigh way more. Pemmican is basically nature's energy bar on steroids. And the weird part? It almost disappeared completely. During the 1800s, colonial governments banned native hunting practices and restricted access to traditional food sources. The knowledge nearly died with those policies. Generations of survival wisdom almost wiped out because someone decided imported grain was civilized. Meanwhile, settlers were hauling massive barrels of salted pork across the plains. Heavy, expensive, and it's still spoiled. Makes sense, right? Here's why pemmican works so well. The rendered fat creates an airtight seal around the protein. Bacteria need moisture and oxygen to grow. Pemmican has almost no moisture, and the fat blocks oxygen. It's basically vacuum sealed by chemistry. I made some last year. Tasted like beef jerky had a baby with a candle. Not gourmet, but when I found it in my garage 6 months later, still perfect. My wife's leftovers can't survive 3 days in our fridge. NASA actually studied pemmican when designing compact nutrition for astronauts. They wanted something lightweight, shelf-stable, and packed with energy. Sound familiar? They eventually went synthetic, but the principle came straight from Native American kitchens. Modern preppers are catching on. Emergency food companies now sell pemmican-style products for disaster kits. Hikers carry it for lightweight calories. Some folks make batches during inflation spikes because, unlike groceries, this stuff doesn't need replacing every year. Free calories that last forever in this economy, but pemmican only solves one problem: food you carry with you. What about harvesting food where you are without constant work? That requires a completely different approach, one that colonial governments hated so much they literally tore it apart with their bare hands. Fish are slippery, literally and figuratively. You can spend 8 hours with a spear and catch maybe 2, or you could build something that catches fish while you take a nap. Native American tribes across the continent figured this out thousands of years ago. They built fish weirs, basically stone and wood barriers that funnel fish into shallow pools where they're easy to grab. Set it up once, harvest forever. That's not laziness. That's engineering. And here's what made these things brilliant beyond just the convenience factor. They were designed with gaps. Small fish swam right through. Only the big ones got caught. The tribes weren't trying to empty the river. They wanted fish next year too. Makes sense, right? Colonial governments saw these weirs and said, nope, destroyed them, banned them, called them primitive obstructions to navigation. Meanwhile, European fishing methods were literally wiping out entire fish populations up and down the Atlantic coast. But sure, the people who'd been sustainably fishing for 5,000 years were the problem. I'm not exaggerating about that timeline either. Archaeologists have found weir systems in the Pacific Northwest that were used continuously for over 5,000 years. Same spots, same methods, generation after generation pulling fish from the same pools their great-great-great-grandparents used. Try finding a modern fishing company with a 5,000-year business plan. Well, modern biologists finally caught up. Studies now show that properly designed weirs actually improve fish populations. The barriers create resting pools. They slow water during spawning season. They filter out predators. The fish literally thrive better with these structures than without them. The aquaculture industry noticed modern fish farms use the exact same channeling principles now. They just call it something fancier and charge more for it. Conservation projects are even rebuilding traditional weirs to restore damaged river ecosystems. But the real genius isn't the engineering. It's the philosophy. These weren't just fish traps. They were agreements with nature. Take what you need, leave the rest. The system sustains itself if you respect the system. I tried setting up a primitive version once on a camping trip. Spent 4 hours stacking rocks. Caught nothing because I put it in completely the wrong spot. Turns out there's actual knowledge involved, not just pile rocks and hope. The tribes knew exactly where fish traveled, when they spawned, how currents moved. That's not primitive. That's a biology degree earned over millennia. Speaking of turning worthless things into survival food, the next technique takes something most people consider trash and transforms it into flour better than wheat. Acorns. They're everywhere. Fall comes around and they're crunching under your feet like nature's bubble wrap. Squirrels hoard them. Deer eat them. But most people, they walk right past free food. Here's the thing though. You can't just pop an acorn in your mouth. Well, you can. Once, the tannins inside are so bitter and astringent, they'll make your face fold in half. High doses can actually damage your kidneys and mess with your digestion. Raw acorns are basically nature's way of saying, not so fast, buddy. Native Americans figured out the workaround thousands of years ago, and it's embarrassingly simple. Water. That's it, just water. They'd shell the acorns, grind them into a meal, then run cold water through it repeatedly. Sometimes in baskets set in streams, sometimes in sandy pits that acted as natural filters. The water slowly pulls out the tannins. Takes a few hours to a full day depending on the method. But when you're done, you've got flour that's actually sweeter and nuttier than wheat. And nutritionally, this stuff punches way above its weight. Acorn flour contains about 6% fat and nearly 7% protein. Wheat flour sits around 1% fat. Plus, acorns deliver potassium, magnesium, and vitamin B6. My grandmother would have called this good eating. She also thought prunes were dessert, but still. Now here's where it gets ridiculous. A single mature oak tree can drop over 500 pounds of acorns in a good year. Run the math on calories per acre, and oak trees outproduce wheat fields. Meanwhile, European settlers were literally starving next to oak forests while waiting for grain shipments from across an ocean. I tried processing acorns myself last fall. Took forever. My kitchen looked like a crime scene committed by very small woodland creatures, but the pancakes I made afterward, actually delicious. My wife was shocked. She's usually shocked when I cook anything edible. The knowledge nearly disappeared because colonial authorities pushed grain farming as the civilized way to eat. Acorns were dismissed as primitive survival food. Today, acorn flour sells for $12 to $15 a pound in specialty stores. Hipster cafes in Brooklyn put it in pastries, so the primitive food became a luxury product. There's a joke in there somewhere about history repeating itself. But free food is just one piece of the puzzle. What about tools? Specifically, rope. Because without cordage, survival gets a whole lot harder. Let's talk about something you use every single day without thinking about it. Rope! Sounds boring, right? Stick with me, because what Native Americans did with plant fibers will make you look at that paracord in your garage very differently. Here's a fact that blew my mind. Yucca cordage, twisted by hand from raw plant fibers, rivals nylon in strength-to-weight ratio. No factories, no petroleum products, just plants and knowledge. Tribes across North America twisted fibers from yucca, milkweed, stinging nettle, and dogbane into cordage that could haul hundreds of pounds. They built shelters with it, set traps, made fishing lines thin enough to fool trout, but strong enough to land them. And the weird part is, they did this without a single tool. Your fingers. That's it. Roll the fibers on your thigh, twist them together, and you've got rope. I tried this last summer with some milkweed. Took me about an hour to make 6 feet of usable cordage. Looked rough. Held my weight from a tree branch. My store-bought paracord, the cheap stuff frayed after 2 camping trips. See, modern tensile testing has confirmed what native craftspeople knew centuries ago. Natural plant fibers, when properly processed and twisted, outperform bargain synthetic rope in durability and flexibility. The fibers grip each other naturally. They don't slip under load like nylon can. But colonial trade had other plans. Why teach people to make their own rope when you can sell them imported hemp and cotton? Fiber knowledge became unnecessary. Then it became forgotten. Another skill traded for convenience. Makes sense from a business perspective, I guess. Terrible for actual survival. Here's what survival instructors teach now. In a real emergency, you need cordage for everything. Shelter building, snares for food, splints for injuries, fishing, tool binding. Without rope, you're basically just a mammal standing in the woods looking confused. And plants that make cordage, they grow everywhere. Roadsides, fields, forests, free materials waiting for anyone who knows the technique. The process isn't complicated either. Harvest fibers, dry them slightly. Twist clockwise with one hand while counter-twisting the strands together. The opposing forces lock everything tight. No store required, no tools needed. Just knowledge that predates your great-great-great-grandmother. Now, making rope is great, but what happens when you catch food and need to store it without electricity? That problem got solved underground. Your refrigerator uses about 700 kilowatts per year. Native Americans used 0, and their food stayed fresh for months. Here's what they figured out. Dig a hole about 4 feet deep, and you hit a temperature zone that barely changes. Summer heat wave? Still 55 degrees down there? Winter freeze? Still 55 degrees? The earth itself becomes your cooler. But they didn't just dig random holes and hope for the best. The pit lining made all the difference. Clay was the go-to material because it creates a moisture barrier. Water can't seep in from surrounding soil. Pests can't tunnel through. Some tribes layered bark or grass on top of the clay for extra insulation. Others used tightly woven baskets inside the pits to organize different foods. I actually tried building one of these in my backyard last summer. My wife thought I'd lost my mind. But 3 months later, those potatoes were still firm while the ones in our garage had sprouted into alien life forms. The science is straightforward. Below the frost line, ground temperature stays remarkably stable because soil is a terrible conductor of heat. Changes happen slowly, really slowly. This thermal mass effect means your food experiences almost no temperature swings. and temperature swings are what destroy stored food. European settlers, meanwhile, relied on salt and ice. Salt meant expensive imports and ruined flavor. Ice meant building insulated ice houses, harvesting frozen lakes in winter, and praying your storage lasted until August. Most of the time, it didn't. They spent enormous effort solving a problem that required nothing but a shovel. Archaeological sites reveal just how effective these pits were. Researchers have found organic material preserved in storage pits that's centuries old. Seeds, corn cobs, dried meat traces. The pits worked so well that evidence survived longer than the civilizations that dug them. Modern root cellars operate on identical principles. Same depth, same stable temperatures, same results. We just added concrete and called it innovation. What makes this particularly relevant now is grid dependency. One extended blackout, and every refrigerator becomes an expensive box. Food spoils in days. But underground storage, completely immune to power outages. Works during hurricanes, works during ice storms, works when your generator runs out of fuel. No electricity bill either. Now, shelter is great. Food storage is essential. But what happens when you need protection from the elements immediately and you've got nothing but sticks and grass? That's where the next technique comes in. Now here's something that really gets under my skin. The government literally made it illegal for people to build their own homes. Not meth labs, homes. Wikiup shelters were dome-shaped structures made from standing deadwood, bark, grass, and whatever nature had lying around. One person could build one in 2 to 4 hours. No hammer, no nails, no trip to the hardware store where you spend $300 and still forget something. The design was brilliant. That curved shape naturally sheds rain like water off a duck's back. Position a small fire at the entrance, and the dome reflects heat right back at you. It's basically a one-room apartment with built-in climate control. And the weird part is, forced assimilation policies actually banned these traditional shelters. The government decided Native Americans needed to live in proper houses. You know, the kind that cost money, required tools, and fell apart without constant maintenance. Meanwhile, wikiups had kept people alive through brutal winters for thousands of years. But sure, the log cabin with gaps you could throw a cat through was definitely the upgrade. Here's where it gets ironic. Decades later, the U.S. military started studying wikiup insulation design for field housing. They realized soldiers needed emergency shelters that were fast, warm, and didn't require supply trucks. Guess what design they kept coming back to? The materials matter too. Standing dead wood is already partially dried, so it doesn't rot as quickly. Fresh-cut green wood? That's a moisture trap waiting to make you miserable. Native builders understood material science before we called it that. I tried building a basic debris shelter once during a camping trip. It took me 6 hours and looked like a beaver had a nervous breakdown. A proper wikiup builder would have had dinner cooking by the time I figured out which end was the door. The construction follows structural principles engineers use today. The dome distributes weight evenly. Overlapping bark and grass layers create natural shingles. Even the entrance placement was calculated to block prevailing winds. Modern survival instructors now teach wikiup building as a core skill. It's funny how that works. Ban something for being primitive, then rediscover it's actually genius. Every single technique we've covered today shares one thing in common. They were dismissed, banned, or deliberately erased, and every single one turned out to be scientifically sound. Sometimes the old ways aren't just good enough, they're better. We just stopped listening to the people who knew.